Welcome to the Eduonics Amazon Cloud course. Let's just take a moment to outline what we will learn during the course. This is the document with the title Introduction, and you can find this document in the documentation folder for the course. In this document, we will outline the learning scope and sequence for the course. We will do this by giving the video name and then a brief description or highlight of what you will learn in that video. In the first video, called AWS Overview, where AWS is the acronym for Amazon Web Services, we will first look at the high level, what you can do with AWS. Then, for virtual machines that are running in AWS EC2 instances, we will look at schemas for these virtual machines. What are the different types of virtual machines you can find on AWS? Then we will look at the network infrastructure and web interfaces available in AWS for its notification services, its queuing services, its MapReduce services. For all the different services, there are pipelines into the service and interfaces for that service. Then we will look at the persistence options for AWS, the models and the schemas for both the relational and the NoSQL that are available on AWS. In the second part of the AWS Overview video 2, we will look at some high-level design principles for building applications on AWS. Because AWS is a cloud infrastructure is fundamentally different to physical in-house infrastructure. So applications designed for the cloud use a different set of design principles. And we will go through an overview and introduction to the overall AWS architecture. In the third video, we will go through the basics of AWS system administration. We will look at the top-level AWS administration console. We will look at the different types of administration credentials and how to access those administration credentials. We will explain why it's not a good idea to use these credentials if you can avoid it. We will look at the IAM console, where the IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. We will look at creating users and giving permissions to users. We will look at creating groups and giving permissions to groups, and how you can use combinations of users and groups to safely set up access for different API tasks. We will look at how permissions relate to what are known as AWS policies, how to create these policies, how to configure them for services, and the policy syntax. Finally, we will look at making authenticated API calls for a registered IAM user. In the fourth video, AWS Java SDK, where SDK stands for Software Development Kit, we will look at Amazon services and the software development kit for Amazon services. We will look at using the IAM console with the software development kit, obtaining, download and installing the SDK, and configuring the SDK with credentials from the IAM console so we can make our authenticated API calls, where API stands for Application Programmers Interface. In video 5, we will look at the core Amazon service Simple Storage Service, S3. S3 is very much the workhorse service of the AWS architecture. We will look at what is the S3 service, how to use it, how to construct an S3 service application with the Amazon SDK, then use that application to perform operations that create, list, upload data, download data from, delete S3 buckets. We will look at operations for those buckets. We will look at how we can access S3 buckets and bucket identifiers with the AWS console, how we can create S3 permissions and policies. We will create an application that demonstrates all of these operations. In video 6, we will look at AWS CloudFront Service. What is the CloudFront Service and how to use it? CloudFront works closely with S3. It's a content delivery network, or CDN, and we will look at it from a network sense, its network architecture and topology. We will construct a CloudFront service application with the SDK and deliver content from an S3 bucket via a CloudFront CDN URL, where CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. We will look at creating CloudFront permissions and policies and employ all these operations in the CloudFront application we construct with the Amazon SDK. In video 7, with the title EC2 Virtual Servers, we will look at Amazon AWS Virtualization Technology. its architecture for the AWS platform, how it delivers a virtualization service, and look at the architecture of any one individual EC2 virtual machine. We will look at the advantages of using EC2 virtual machine, how to choose an appropriate instance type for your application, the schema for the different on-demand, spot and reserved instances, their costs and benefits, look at operating systems that are available for EC2 virtual machines and the costs and benefits of any one particular operating system. We will look at Amazon Machine Images, AMI, the different providers and types of AMI. We will look at the AWS EC2 console where we can configure and administer our virtual machines. We'll look at creating and configuring an EC2 virtual machine with an Amazon Machine Image, selecting a region, creating a SSH protocol public-private security key for a region and an EC2 virtual machine. We'll look at booting the EC2 virtual machine and monitoring the EC2 virtual machine. In video 8, EC2 Virtual Service Part 2, we will go further into the EC2 console for configuring the attributes of our running instances. We will go through how you convert public-private security keys for SSH access using PuTTY and PuTTYGen. We will use the SSH public-private key to gain SSH access into the running Amazon instance. We will need to understand SSH access, how to construct the SSH access URL, such as the appropriate username and host address, how to find the host address from the EC2 console. Then we will look at what's involved in setting up what's known as a mean stack, that's a MongoDB database with a Node.js application. We'll set up this Node.js server with a MongoDB backend on the EC2 virtual machine and see how easy that is to do. Using the AWS EC2 security groups, we will make sure we've locked down the AMI, configuring the AMI firewall to access the internal ports with port forwarding. And here AMI stands for the Amazon Machine Image, so whatever particular image we're using, we will need to configure its firewall and its internal ports and lock it down with the security group so that no one can hack into our virtual machine. In video 9, we look at the Amazon AWS DynamoDB service, where DynamoDB is Amazon's NoSQL persistent data store. We look at the model architecture employed by DynamoDB, and we look closely at its document structure. NoSQL generally store artifacts as documents. DynamoDB has a table structure. We understand the relationship between the table structure and the document structure, how tables are composed of records, items and attributes, and we have a clear understanding of each of these with examples. Then we look at how DynamoDB has primary keys, where we have two types, a hash primary key and a hash range primary key. We look at the indexing strategy employed by DynamoDB. We have an introduction to the two query APIs for DynamoDB, the query API and the scan API, and understand how they're different. And we look at the DynamoDB low-level data types. Finally, we wind up this important segment by creating a simple DynamoDB application with the Amazon SDK, and that application performs basic CRUD operations. In video 10, we look at elastic load balancers. When we have a group of EC2 instances, we can balance the load between the individual instances in the group. But it goes wider. We can construct topologies where we have groups in a wider topology or a topology for the group. We can balance the load between the individual members of any group or topology where each member is an EC2 instance. We can look at how we can use dynamic IPs and Amazon's DNS Route 53 to route to different members of our topologies with load balancing. We look at how we can set up groups of EC2 instances with provisioning, how we can manage those with CloudWatch and auto-scaling, how we can use CloudFormation to do the provisioning and Elastic Beanstalk to manage the dynamic scaling. AWS is a wide, sophisticated cloud service. We just look at the introductory concepts at a high level for these higher level services. In video 11, we look at Amazon's simple services concept. Amazon have a number of simple services which they add to all the time. The first simple service was the S3 simple storage service. So in this video segment, we just aggregate all the common concepts and ideas that relate to a simple service, its architecture, and how to design applications that use simple services. In video 12, we create a simple services email application where we create the application's policy, we create the actual application itself with the Java SDK, and we look at the common error messages and how to resolve them. So when you are setting up your credentials, you must attach them to the correct region. There are many common errors using the incorrect host domain name. There are many common errors that you run into, so we look at how we can resolve those simple API errors when you first construct a simple services email application. Then in the last video segment, we do the same thing for the simple queue service application. We look at how you can use it. Then we create a policy and some credentials to access the simple queue service application. Then we create the simple queue service application itself, and we use it to perform CRUD-like operations where we create, list, update, download, and delete. And that is the final video in the series.